Chapter 7, Charlie's Birthday. Happy birthday, cried the four old grandparents as Charlie came into their room early the next morning. Charlie smiled nervously and sat down on the edge of the bed. He was holding his present, his only present, very carefully in his two hands. Wonka's Whipple Scrumptious Fudge Mellow Delight, it said on the wrapper. The four old people, two at either end of the bed, propped themselves up on their pillows and stared with anxious eyes at the candy bar in Charlie's hands. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket came in and stood at the foot of the bed, watching Charlie. The room became silent. Everybody was waiting now for Charlie to start opening his present. Charlie looked down at the candy bar. He ran his fingers slowly back and forth along the length of it, stroking it lovingly, and the shiny paper wrapper made little sharp crackling noises in the quiet room. Then Mrs. Bucket said gently, "You mustn't be too disappointed, my darling, if you don't find what you're looking for underneath the wrapper. You really can't expect to be lucky as that all." "She's quite right," Mr. Bucket said. Charlie didn't say anything. "After all," Grandma Josephine said, "in the whole wide world there are only 3 tickets left to be found." "The thing to remember," Grandma Georgina said, "is whatever happens, you still have the bar of candy." "Wonka's Wimple Scrumptious Fudge Mellow Delight," cried Grandpa George. "It's the best of them all. You'll just love it." "Yes," Charlie whispered, "I know. I forgot all about those golden tickets and enjoy the candy," Grandpa Joe said. "Why don't you do that?" They all knew it was ridiculous to expect this one poor little candy bar to have a magic ticket inside it, and they were trying as gently and as kindly as they would to prepare Charlie for the disappointment. But there was one thing that the grown-ups also knew, and it was this, that however small the chance might be of striking lucky, the chance was there. The chance had to be there. This particular candy bar had as much chance as any other having a golden ticket. And that was why all the grandparents and parents in the room were actually just as tense and excited as Charlie was, although they were pretending to be very calm. "You better go ahead and open it up, or you'll be late for school," Grandpa Joe said. "You might as well get it over with," Grandpa George said. "Open it, my dear," Grandma Georgina said. "Please open it. You're making me jumpy." Very slowly, Charlie's fingers began to tear open one small corner of the wrapping paper. The old people in the bed all leaned forward, craning their scraggly necks. Then suddenly, as though he couldn't hear the suspense any longer, Charlie tore the wrapper paper right down the middle, and on his lap there fell a light brown, creamy colored chocolate candy bar. There was no sign of a golden ticket anywhere. "Well, that's it," said Grandpa Joe brightly. "It's just what we expected." Charlie looked up. 4 kinds of old faces were watching him intently from the bed. He smiled at them, a small sad smile, and he shrugged his shoulders and picked up the candy bar and held it out to his mother and said, "Here, Mother, have a bit. We'll share it. I want everybody to taste it." "Certainly not," his mother said, and the others all cried, "No, no, we wouldn't dream of it. It's all yours." "Please," begged Charlie, turning around and offering it to Grandpa Joe, but neither he nor anybody else would have even a tiny bit. "It's time to go to school, my darling," Mrs. Bucket said, putting an arm around Charlie's shiny shoulders. "Come on, or you'll be late."
Hi, this is Mrs. Keys, and I am reading Chapter 8 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. 2 more golden tickets found. That evening, Mr. Bucket's newspaper announced the finding of not only the 3rd golden ticket, but the 4th as well. 2 golden tickets found today, screamed the headlines. Only 1 more left. "All right," said Grandpa Joe when the whole family was gathered in the old people's room after supper. "Let's hear who found them." The 3rd ticket read, Mr. Bucket, holding the newspaper up close to his face because his eyes were bad and he couldn't afford glasses. The 3rd ticket was found by Miss Violet Beauregard. There was great excitement in the Burgegord household when a reporter arrived to interview the lucky young lady. Cameras were clicking and flashbulbs were flashing, and people were pushing and jostling and trying to get a bit closer to the famous girl. And the famous girl was standing on a chair in the living room, waving the golden ticket madly at arm's length as though she was flagging a taxi. She was talking very fast and very loudly to everyone, but it was not easy to hear all that she said because she was chewing so ferociously upon the piece of gum at the same time. I'm a gum chewer normally, she shouted, but when I heard about these ticket things at Mr. Wonka's, I laid off the gum and switched to candy bars in hope of striking lucky. Now, of course, I'm right back on gum. I just adore gum. I can't do without it. I munch it all day long except for a few minutes at meal times when I take it out and stick it behind my ear for safekeeping. To tell you the honest truth, I simply wouldn't feel comfortable if I didn't have that little wedge of gum to chew on every moment of the day. I really wouldn't. My mother says it's not ladylike and it looks ugly to see a girl's jaw going up and down like mine do all the time. But I don't agree. And who's she to criticize anyway? Because if you ask me, I'd say that her jaws are going up and down almost as much as mine are just from yelling at me every minute of the day. Now, Violet, Mrs. Verduda said from a far corner of the room where she was standing on a piano to avoid being trampled by the mob. All right, Mother, keep your hair on. Miss Verduga shouted. And now, she went on, turning to the reporters again, it may interest you to know that this piece of gum I'm chewing right at this moment is one I've been on for over 3 months solid. That's a record, that is. It's beaten the record held by my best friend, Miss Cornelia Principmetal. And was she mad? It's my most treasured possession now, this piece of gum is. At night, I just stick it on the end of the bedpost and it's as good as ever in the mornings. A bit hard at first, maybe, but it soon softens up again after I've given it a few chews. Before I started chewing for the world record, I used to change my piece of gum once a day. I used to do it in our elevator on the way home from school. Why the elevator? Because I like sticking the gooey piece that I just finished with onto one of the elevator buttons. Then the next person who came along and pressed the button got my old gum on the end of his or her finger. Ha ha ha! And what a racket they kicked up, some of them. You get the best results with women who have expensive gloves on. Oh yes, I'm thrilled to be going to Mr. Wonka's factory. And I understand that afterwards he's going to give me enough gum to last me for the rest of my whole life. Whoopee! Hooray! Beastly girl, said Grandma Josephine. Despicable, said Grandma Georgina. She'll come to a sticky end one day, chewing all that gum. You'll see if she does it. And who's got the fourth golden ticket, Daddy? Charlie asked. Now let me see, said Mr. Bucket, peering at the newspaper again. Ah, yes, here we are. The fourth golden ticket, he read, was found by a boy named Mike Teavee. Another bad lot, all bound, muttered Grandma Josephine. Don't interrupt, Grandma, said Mrs. Bucket. The Teavee household, said Mr. Bucket, going on with his reading, was crammed like all the others with excited visitors when our reporters arrived. But young Mike Teavee, the lucky winner, seemed extremely annoyed by the whole business. Can't you fools see I'm watching television? He said angrily. I wish you wouldn't interrupt. The 9-year-old boy was seated before an enormous television set with his eyes glued on the screen, and he was watching a film in which one bunch of gangsters was shooting up another bunch of gangsters with machine guns. Mike Teavee himself had no less than 18 toy pistols of various sizes hanging from belts around his body, and every now and again he would leap onto the air and fire off a half a dozen rounds from one or another weapons. Quiet, he shouted when someone tried to ask him a question. Didn't I tell you not to interrupt? This show's an absolute whiz-banger. It's terrific. I watch it every day. I watch all of them every day, even the crummy ones where there's no shooting. I like the gangsters the best. They're terrific, those gangsters, especially when they start pumping each other full of lead, or flashing the old stilettos, or giving each other the 1, 2, 3 with the knuckle dusters. Oh boy, what I wouldn't give to be doing that myself. It's the life, I tell you, it's terrific. That's quite enough, snapped Grandma Josephine. I can't bear to listen to it. Nor me, said Grandma Georgina. Do all children behave like this nowadays? Like these brats we've been hearing about? Of course not, said Mr. Bucket, smiling at the old lady in bed. Some do, of course. In fact, quite a lot of them do, but not all. And now there's only one ticket left, said Grandpa George. Quite so, sniffed Grandma Georgina. And just as sure as I'll be having cabbage soup for tomorrow, that ticket will go to some nasty little beast who doesn't deserve it. That was chapter 8, and our chapter 8 discussion question is, what does it tell you about Charlie's character that, even though he only gets one chocolate bar a year, he still tries to share it with his family? All right, that is all chapter 8. I hope you guys have a good day.